Greetings, North Park Church. Pastor Luke here with another episode of First Looks as I take a peek at the passage that I'll be preaching to you this Sunday. And as I like to do, just interact with the text, see where my mind goes as we spend time in prayer and as we spend time just looking at the words that were written. And so with that, just a reminder that we are in a series that's called the 7 Churches of Revelation, from Revelation chapter 2 through 3. And last week we looked at the church of Ephesus. This week we'll be looking at the church of Smyrna from Revelation 2, 8 through 11. So not a lot of text here. It's a short letter to this church, but nevertheless, it is jam-packed with content. And I don't think we're gonna have any trouble having a full 30-minute sermon come out of this one, or 35 minutes. We'll see what it turns out to be. So, as I mentioned last week, these 7 letters to these 7 churches all carry the same format. And so what we see first is a title of Christ that is chosen specifically for this church. Okay, each one has that. And also, maybe I'll just let it be known here that maybe a P.S. Each title is directly drawn from John's vision in chapter 1. So that's a cool little note there to see that the words of the first and last, the one who came to life, and with Ephesus, the one who holds the 7 stars in his hand and who walks amongst the 7 golden lampstands. Now, all of these opening titles are come from chapter 1. But what's so cool, what I love about this is that Christ takes the aspect of who he is. And I'm just going to start jotting this down now because I like where my head's going here. Take note that Christ supplies the title about himself that best ministers to each church's context / situation. Now, that's just really great stuff there because we see Christ as the wonderful counselor. He is all of these things that are envisioned in chapter 1, but he brings comfort and exhortation, and he stirs the church's best in just such an acute way, knowing where their needs are and how they need ministered to by who he is. And he just supplies that to them in this opening declaration about who he is. And it's just really, really cool. Really cool stuff there. Love it. All right. So that's how each one of these letters opens. And then we have a body of text that will be roughly about right there, and it'll kind of split right there. And here we see a message of encouragement / exhortation for each church. Okay. Usually comes with positive and negatives. Smyrna and Philadelphia are the two who have nothing negative said about them. So let's put that right there. Smyrna and Philadelphia, Philly, are the two with no negatives. Also, let it be known, those two are suffering. They're suffering churches. Okay, so, and then what each one of these letters ends with is an, how do I want to say it here? It's a word. A word of hope to the one who overcomes. That's what we see in the ESV, or conquers. It says conquers in the ESV. Overcomes is another translation. The same word of the Greek nikao, where the Nike brand comes from. So that Greek word Nike or nikao, and there's a word of hope to the one who conquers, who hears the words of Jesus, heeds them, presses on and endures. And there's something about the future hope that's declared there. So there we go. Let's go back to the top now and start looking at this text a little bit more specifically. So here, let me go. There we go. To the angel of the church of Smyrna, we looked at that. It's the same way each letter opens. We talked a little bit last week about what it means. The angel, we're going to make the case that this is the angelic being who has some level of jurisdiction, responsibility, role interacting with a particular church. Again, that might elicit a number of questions for you, and that's okay. But I don't know that we'll necessarily find an answer in the scriptures about all the ins and outs of what that means and what that looks like in the spiritual realm. But to this church, it says, write the words of the first and last who died and came to life. So 2 parts here. The first and last, which emphasizes the eternality of Christ. And then the one who died and who came to life. And we see in this, we see the power of the power of the resurrection. Power of the resurrection. So there's resurrection power in Jesus. He's the eternal one, and so those two facets of Christ's always existence and his conquering of the grave, those two titles are going to be really important for the church of Smyrna. Let's look at the church and see what it has to say about them. It says, Jesus says, I know. Oh, I just always want to emphasize that. I know. And I just want to say, brother and sister, Never forget that he knows. Whatever it is, whatever you're struggling with, whatever that tribulation might look like, whatever point of suffering, whatever trial, whatever testing, whatever hardship that you are experiencing, do not forget that Jesus, he knows it. And in this case, to the church in Smyrna, he knows their tribulation and their poverty. Now, in the most direct sense, this is a persecuted church by both the Romans and the Jews. Okay, so they're taking a double barrage of persecution there, and we'll talk more about that. And he knows the poverty because this church did not partake in the emperor worship that was really prevalent in Smyrna, and because the Jews hated them for their blasphemous claims that the Messiah had come, they were ostracized from every angle, and so in that meant that people wouldn't do business with them, that they would be prevented from purchasing in certain areas. It would just make it a really hard living situation, and because of that, they have legitimate financial poverty. They are legitimately in want, and so they are, from a worldly perspective, they are needy. But look at what it says next. I love this. So good. But you are rich. And in this, it doesn't expound on that any further in this about what that richness means, but I think we could do quite a bit with it. And we could, you are rich. There is treasure and wealth and goodness. We could just keep going, but we'll stop there. That belongs to the church in Smyrna, and that cannot be robbed from them. And that's good. All right. So that's kind of the identification that they are suffering. They are being persecuted. They are impoverished, legitimately hungry and naked, and needing help. And then it goes on to say this, and the slander of those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. So this indicates a little bit more for us the type of situation that they were in. There was a slandering from the Jews, and this likely was false accusations. To Romans to promote Christian persecution. Okay, this is probably something similar to when the was the Sadducees who took the Roman soldiers with them, and they asked Jesus, should we pay taxes to Caesar or not? And it was a trick. And the way that it was a trick is that if Jesus says, yeah, pay your taxes, the Romans are fine, but then all the Jewish people say, see, this guy is pro-Rome and pro the oppressive civilization that is oppressing God's people, Israel. But if Jesus says, no, don't pay your taxes, then the Romans are going to take him away and throw him into prison. Now, Jesus being the just the masterful respondent to that, he ends up saying, well, whose face is on the coin? Caesar. He says, well, give to Caesar what belongs to him, and then give to God what belongs to God. And then just such a skillful way of handling that. And so it might have been something similar where the Jews are slandering and accusing the Jewish Christians to the Roman authorities, so that the Romans can use their force to persecute the Christians. That's likely something that's going on there. And I think one of the textual indicators is that, well, for one, we have the slander, and then look at it. Jesus' response is that they are not Jews. They are a synagogue of Satan. Now, Satan comes from the Hebrew, Satan, which means accuser or adversary. And so he is saying the Jews are slandering you, and they are acting like Satan in their so doing. And so Satan, the slander, Jews slandering God's people, the Christians. So goes on to say, do not fear what you're about to suffer. So a little exhortation right there. Do not fear. The most common command, the most prevalent command in the scriptures: do not fear, do not be afraid. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil. Okay, now here we go. We have two titles for Satan, and the fact that they use the Satan title for when referring to the slander of the Jews, or excuse me, the slander from the Jews against the Christians is important to connect. But then we see that Satan is now called the devil here, and that he is about to throw some of these into prison. Now, some theologians will look at this next part, which says that you may be tested, and for 10 days. Some commentators look at this and connect it Daniel chapter 1. Daniel is the book of the Old Testament that is most alluded to in Revelation. The Revelation is just littered, absolutely littered with allusions and micro allusions to the Old Testament. It rarely directly quotes the Old Testament, but all over the place you get these words and phrasings that are just screaming Old Testament. And Daniel is the book that's alluded to the most. And then you have a lot of Ezekiel in there, and so with that, there might be a little bit of a connection of the testing of Daniel in this phrasing, that they might be tested for 10 days, how Daniel was tested, and he refused to eat king's food, and that was Babylon, which shows up in Revelation 17:18-ish, quite a bit in a quite negative way. And so there might be some kind of connection there. We'll investigate that more before we preach. But behold, the devil, he's about to do this, and again, that's the Greek diabolos. It's different than Satan, and he's about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested for 10 days, and you will have tribulation. This is a prophetic promise. This is about to happen, and God is going to allow it. That's something that we always need to keep in our theological framework here, is that God allows hard things. He allows at times evil things and wicked things. He's not the author of evil by no means, but he allows it into our lives at times, and we shouldn't be caught off guard or surprised when it comes into our life. This is something that's always been the case in this fallen, broken world. But look at the encouragement. The encouragement for this church here is to be faithful unto death. Okay, they're being told they're going to die. Probably many in the church of Smyrna received this letter and prepared to die, and then were killed and persecuted unto death, martyred for their faith. But look at what Jesus says: "Stay faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life." I will give you the crown of life. Here's the reward. The reward for the one who endures eternal life. Now, why can you count on that? Why can you count on Jesus having the ability to supply this? Well, we already looked at it. All right. Look at the top. Because he is the first and he's the last. He's the one who died and who came to life. Because of who Jesus is, you too can have a hope of participating in the eternal life that he has, if you endure. And so we see how the title that he gives to this church, it's about to be persecuted to death. The title of who Jesus is and the hope that he encourages them with is just what they will need to stay faithful to holding fast to the name of Jesus, even when it means that their earthly life is ended. And then it goes on to say, "He who has an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches." Again, this is a consistent pattern in all of these letters. That phrasing right there. The one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death. The one who conquers to the end, who remains faithful, will not be hurt by the second death. That means that there is a second death that's out there. But if you have the crown of life, you don't need to be afraid. So, just some notes. There is a second death. And that's talked about more at the later on in this book. But you don't need to fear it if you have the crown of life. Just keep going. That Jesus alone can give you. So, there it is. And so because of that, because Jesus can give you the crown of life, so do not be afraid. There it is. Do not fear. So, do not fear. You don't need to fear. All right. And so, some of the things that I want to investigate a little bit more is really the idea of richness, I think. Spiritual richness versus what the world can give. Because here's the reality is we don't have a ton of intense persecution here in America. We just don't. Somebody might say something mean to you on Facebook. Maybe it's a little bit more intense with family. That might be the case. Things are certainly trending more intense here in America, but it's nothing to be compared with the Middle East or Southeast Asia, or other parts of the world where you can literally be killed, put to death for your faith, and so I think sometimes we can sometimes feel like maybe these persecution passages are a little bit distant to us, and we say, well, what does it really look like for me in a particular context where persecution is not very prevalent in our day-to-day lives. And so I think there is something here, and I think it's going to be situated around the idea of the richness and wealth that we have in Christ that cannot be received in this world. And I think that's something that I really want to focus in on and look a little bit more into. And so this is a good passage. This is a great passage. There's so much encouragement in here. Christ is beautiful in this. Our hope is beautiful in this. And, oh goodness, just as I always finish with all of these first look episodes, I'm just ready to preach it already. So, but we got more work to do. Well, I hope this is helpful for you, church, and look forward to being with you on Sunday when we see what the final message is that I believe the Spirit of God has for us, North Park Community Church, to move us deeper into the way of Christ. And so, I love you, church, and I'll see you Sunday.